Well, good evening. It is exciting to be with you. I usually love to have my wife and kids with me, and they were intending to. My wife actually had an uncle die yesterday, and he lives in Ohio, so we're leaving early in the morning to drive up there and be part of that. So she is packing and other things. So you're getting the worst part of our family, and so God bless you in that. I'm always feel funny with the introductions because, and they always say, send us a bio. So I got on somebody else's website and, they're talking about their stuff. So I just put my name and my stuff associated with me. But it does give you context and it lets you know, hey, here's where this guy's coming from, and that's fine. But really what it comes down to is I really love God because I get it that I really need him. And I get it more now than I did when I started. The more I live, the more aware I am of how desperate I am for a Savior and how in need of a Lord I am. And so that's really the main thing that connects us, the thing that makes this of value. If God doesn't speak tonight, it doesn't matter what I've done up to this point. And so that is always my prayer. This idea of going through the Psalms, effectively you're going through poetry. And poetry is an interesting thing. It's kind of hard to define, and especially if you don't like it, like me, or you are not interested in it, like me. But poetry in general, even defined by people that love it, it's a little bit challenging. Matter of fact, if you Google what is poetry, one of the things that will come up is a blog post that says, what is poetry, 50 definitions and counting. And you get on this list of definitions of poetry, and the reason is it's not like prose. Prose tells a story. In a very usually sequential way, and you're like saying, okay, this led to this, led to this, led to this. But with poetry, it has pictures, it has symbols, it focuses on feelings and ideas. And sometimes the author will want you to take it literally and sometimes not, but it kind of leaves you a little bit confused at times. And so we're going to do the remedial version then of how I basically approach the Psalms and poetry in general is as pictures. And so here's how we're going to think about this. Imagine going into a gallery, and on the walls, and you can imagine paintings or photographs, but very well done, kind of high definition kind of things. And you go, and the artist is telling a story through these pictures. And so you go to one picture, and it's not like abstract where you're like, is that an elephant or Van Gogh? What is going on in this picture? It's a clear picture, and you say, oh, and then you get to the next picture, and you say, oh. And so what I want you to do something that very, very infrequently our adults encourage to do this. I want you to, you ready? Use your imaginations, okay? Use your imaginations. You're picturing in your head what is being said. And so I want to invite you for this first read through. I just want you to listen. Matter of fact, it helps me a lot to close my eyes. I won't do that because I might lose equilibrium and fall over, and that'd be awkward. But I encourage you, rest and kind of just think, what are the pictures that pop in your mind when you hear this? So, you ready? Here we go. O Lord, you have searched me, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame, it wasn't hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. Days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Wow. I mean, that is really some amazing pictures. I want you to keep this in mind. One scholar wrote, both in loftiness of thought and in expressive beauty of language, Psalm 139 stands preeminent above all the others. It is not surprising that it has been called the crown of the Psalms. The superscription that goes right above, the psalm right before verse 1, it says this. It addresses the psalm to the choir director. So keep this in mind. This is an indication that the psalm was set to music for use in public worship. The entire congregation was to use the psalm. Its utterances were to be adopted by every member of the congregation. And so we're going to keep that in mind and reflect on that a little bit later. Now, I would love to have personal conversations with each of you and say, what pictures popped into your head? Because they'd be different than mine, okay? But we don't have that luxury. And so we're going to kind of process through this psalm from one person's perspective of the pictures. Okay, verse 1. O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Now, that first scene I have in my head is like a crime scene investigation of you or of me. Not because you're criminals, you understand, but it's the scrutiny, the intensity of this thought. He's saying, I see you. And in that picture, maybe you have a picture of you getting out of bed or going to bed or going through some ritual in your day or preparing yourself for work or whatever it is you do, the actions you take, the habits that you carry. He's seeing those pictured in this gallery. And it's a tight scrutiny. Now, one of the dynamics here in Psalms, and there are many, and I'm not an expert, but I don't even know if this pronunciation is correct, but the way it looks to me is the word merism, and it's M-E-R-I-S-M. And what that is a figure of speech, and you find this 3 or 4 times here in the Psalm, and it's in English too. A merism is like high and low. I searched high and low. That doesn't mean, now my wife would accuse me of this, that you went in and just looked on the bottom and looked on the top. That's not what that means, right? It doesn't mean you looked at the extremes. It says, when I say I searched high and low, I searched from here all the way to the top. And what it does is it takes just a couple components of something and says that's the entire thing. For example, another one, he took it lock, stock, and barrel. Well, that goes back to the musket, which the 3 component parts were a lock, a stock, and a barrel. But what it came to mean was something in its entirety. Okay, that's a merism. And that's what this is talking about. When he says, you know when I sit and you know when I rise, it means everything in between. He knows everything. And it's a great scrutiny. It's a great attentiveness that is a little bit disconcerting. But he goes on, and this may be even more troubling. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. I want you to think about that. You ever had a word on the tip of your tongue? What was that? You ever felt that? God knows it. I encourage you, next time you have a tip of your tongue, God, what was that I was thinking? Because why? Because he knows it. Before your thoughts take clothes that we call words, he knows it. And in my picture, in my frame there, it's like a silhouette of my head, and you have all these things that are thoughts just bouncing around, and God is just categorizing those, immediately. Now, here's the amazing thing. Do you know it is estimated that the average amount of thoughts in a day, do you know how many that is for a human being? 50,000. I don't know who they are, how they're finding out, but that's what they say. Now, I know what you're thinking. No, not everybody. I know a guy, he doesn't think ever at all, okay? That's not nice. Stop thinking that. That's rude. But the point is, no matter how many thoughts are processing through, God knows every one. There's an intricacy there that is just mind-blowing to me, that he knows them before they're even coming out of your mouth, and he knows how they're all going to fit together. It is just a staggering thought that he knows us in this way. But here's something interesting. What if you walked into someone's house, and they had all these pictures you've been imagining, and I hope you're the one in those pictures, but they had all these pictures of you and their house? That'd be a little creepy. They got you rising and when you're lying down, and they've got these pictures of your head with all your thoughts inside of them. That'd be kind of intimidating, threatening, frightening. I wonder if that's not what's on David's mind when he goes into the next phrase where he says, you hem me in behind and before you have laid your hand upon me. Because remember, the Psalms are discussing the emotion as well as the facts that these emotions are speaking to. That idea of him, a seamstress could speak to this, but it basically means this idea to be surrounded in a restrictive manner. Other words are bind, besiege, confine, cramp, enclosed, encircled, squeezed. What's that picture for you in your mind when you've been squeezed, maybe physically? It's easy to kind of touch that. In Mexico City, they had these subways. They call them metro. They're underground, you know. And so you'd go in, and it's kind of tight, but at rush hour, I mean, you'd sit there and the doors would open and be like, go! And you're getting in and kind of getting your stuff together because you don't want to be, you know, pickpocketed, you know, and you're holding this up. But you better get in a good position because you know what? About 7 seconds, you're going to have to keep that position because you ain't moving, you know. He hemmed you in, okay? And that's kind of this spirit. I want you to catch this, and there's a beauty in it. But it's kind of like that dynamic there in 2 Corinthians where he says, man, God's message is a fragrance that's awesome to us. But if you're not pursuing God, it is a stench of death. So if you're hearing this psalm and you're not about God's stuff and you're really internalizing it, this is scary stuff. God is in there and he's watching every little thing. And he knows us down to the very fabric of the thoughts forming in our mind right now. Isn't that amazing? So amazing. And he's saying, man, that can feel confining. Matter of fact, he goes on to say, such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Now, part of that could be saying, God is so impressive. But have you ever had that kind of experience where you have this experience and you are just full of wonder, like it's overwhelming? I don't know if you guys, Rex Boyles, I think, probably came here way back in the day. But I was a student of Rex Boyles, and I remember when he would teach sometimes, I can remember just walking out, and my hands were probably up. I was just, transfixed. I was just stunned, And I didn't want to process. I didn't want to discuss any of it with anybody else. I just wanted to process it. I couldn't get my head around it. This is David, as he has had this relationship with God. He's like, it's overwhelming, and I can't even begin to get my head around it. It is so intense that David may have considered escaping, but then it hits him. Where can I go? Where can I go? And those pictures of fleeing to any part. Matter of fact, I love the phrase, if I rise on the wings of the dawn, and I just thought if I get up, I thought what that meant was kind of, if you get up early, you're not going to get up earlier than God. That's not what the scholars say that means. That means if you travel at the speed of dawn, the speed of light, as quick as that light, dawn cuts across the horizon. He said, even if you go that fast, flash fast, even if you could do that, he's saying you won't get away from God. And again, that picture of being confined on one hand, because it's like, man, where can I go? I mean, would you like that? Would you like to have a person that's like, I'm always going to be with you? You're like, oh, that's nice. No, I mean it. I was in the hospital once, and this guy, it was in Ecuador, and I didn't speak much Spanish, and I was in the hospital, and it was a room, and there was no TV in this room, and this guy comes in that I'd met him once, and he sits down, his name was Martin, and I knew like audible, dia, baño, I knew that was a tree, day, and bathroom, but I knew nothing, and he comes and sits down, and he starts talking to me. Have you ever been in the hospital and you had that guy come visit you, and you're like, when is this ending for you? Because I need you to move on. And to not speak the language, and I sat there, finally I just went to sleep, and when I woke up, he was still there. It was really creepy, and he just would watch me. He wasn't unpleasant, he just didn't say anything. It was just creepy. God's saying, you can't get away from me. But again, for those that seek God, how amazing is that? He's the original GPS that says he will guide you, but it's much more than just turn left or turn right, or for me, turn around again. It's much more than that. It's the idea, I will guide you through all trouble. There's no mess you can get into, no matter how stupid you are, that I won't guide you out of if you're looking to me. It's a beautiful, beautiful promise that he's saying, I'm not talking about some kind of theoretical religious talk. I'm talking about your everyday walking around life. I'm talking about the real trouble you find yourself in, whether somebody else caused it or you through your own stupidity did it. He's saying, I'll work with you right at that moment to guide you. My hand will hold you fast. And that right hand, the right hand in Scripture talks about strength. My strength will hold you up. He goes on and he says this, and it's like another element of the same concept. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. Okay, now, it is almost impossible to think of darkness that won't be darkness, okay? Matter of fact, the best I can do is imagine, like if you see my picture in my gallery, and okay, darkness is not darkness, I see him with the green hue on the picture, night vision goggles, kind of thing. But even that is cloudy. If you've ever used night vision goggles, we would use them in war games, and they're fun until you're running, and then it's like all chaos constantly. You got to work really hard. It's like looking at an ultrasound. You're like, no, what is that? I mean, it's just hard. And so even with night vision goggles, it's not crystal clear. And what God is saying is, God's saying it's all HD to me. It's all crystal clear to me. And if you'd imagine, like we even say that, there are times in your past they were dark times, and if you were to paint a picture of it, you might even have them do like they do these treatments on movies and stuff where they make it look darker, the way they do the lighting, and maybe that picture is, but you need to understand, it's not that way to God. He says that with crystal clarity, and he always will see you with crystal clarity. No matter how foggy that the devil makes it seem to you, God says, no, I see you as my son. I see you as my daughter. I see you as a child of the king. I see you with crystal clarity. It's a beautiful thing. He goes on, he says this, and this is a whole nother element. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully, wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. What are your pictures there? Ultrasounds, especially maybe that 3D imaging. Have you seen that? Your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Man, when you see it, that's cool. That is cool. And to David, can you imagine this talk? I mean, it's even kind of a funny thing for us to say in this place, you can see an unformed body. You're like, yeah, okay, I can imagine that. Back then, it's like, now what? And he's like, God can see into the places that we would not even begin to imagine. But not only can he see it, he's in there working. He's not deistic. He's not away from the earth and saying, look, I set these reproductive processes in motion and they're just going to take its course. He's saying, I am at work in all of these elements. Now, to be clear, when he talks about this idea of this wording of in the depths of the earth and things like that, he's not talking about some kind of pre-soul kind of deal. What he's saying there is this is euphemistic for the idea of the womb, the place that for them especially, they couldn't see that, okay? And when he talks about this wovenness, he's talking about, scholars think he's talking about the arteries and the blood vessels, how, again, the intricacy of it. He's talking about, when he says frame, he's talking about the skeleton. When he's talking about that unformed body, he's talking about the embryo. And so he's using these terminologies that we now know because of our science. We said, man, that's how that goes. But he's saying it's so much more to God because he's doing it. He's building it up. And the point here is this. It's one thing to be able to look at a person's life and let's say, though awkward it would be, you were following them and snapshotting every single thing they do. It's another thing to be able to see inside their brain and know their words before they say them. But it's quite a different thing still to know them down to the molecular level. I mean, it's just this beautiful picture of being known. When you fell in love, when you fell in love, part of that whole concept of falling in love is you feel like you're known by the other person. Let's flip it. If you feel like you're living a lie to the other person, do you feel great about that relationship? The more you feel that they know me and accept me and love me, the closer and tighter that bond is. God is saying, I've seen it all. I've seen everything about you, and I still accept you as my child. It's this tremendously beautiful picture that David is painting there of God and his relationship. He comes down towards the end, he said, how precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. And I don't know if you ever tried taking something that small, like a handful of sand, and then you were to count it. Can you imagine? That's a challenge to give to a child. Hey, why don't you count this up for me? It's cruel, but it'd be a good learning lesson. But it's that idea. I had a totally different experience that just flashed in the top of my head. There was a guy, I think he was in Wendy's AIM class, But he always could do better. That'd been a great challenge for him. One time we were in Mexico at the pyramids, and one guy had bought like a bunch of bananas, little tiny bananas. But he ate 2, and he's like, I don't want any more, but I don't want to throw it away. It just seems so wasteful. And so I said, I can get rid of those bananas. And the guy came over, and I'm like, hey, Paul, Corey was just saying that nobody could get 9 of those bananas in their mouth. And Paul was like, I can get 9 bananas in my mouth. And I'm like, no, come on. I wasn't saying you should. I'm just saying nobody could. He did. He put all 9 bananas in his mouth. He'd be the kind of guy say, count up this sand. He'd be like, I can do it. But even him, he'd get to like 1,020,000. Oh, shoot, I lost count. That's worse than how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll Center. It's just like, it's not going to be done, okay? And what the kind of reverse here is this, is David is saying, you know everything about me. But when I try to flip that and try to think, what would God think? Even my best guesses, so much more. So beautiful, so comprehensive, so unbelievably, staggeringly awesome is this God of yours. And he ends and he says this, he says, search me, O God, and know my heart. In other words, he's saying, I want to be part of the testing. It's one thing to just look, but now I want you to do some experiments. Know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. And so what he's saying here is, he's saying, I want to participate in all you have to offer. Okay, but there's a problem. I skipped something, didn't I? And the reason I skipped it is, I've seen a lot of videos of this passage. And it's really pretty. The music in the background is really pretty. It's, oh, Lord, you've searched me and you know me. And it's kind of like you're going through your gallery, and here's a beautiful picture, and here's a beautiful picture, and here's a beautiful picture. And you get to verse 19, and it's like, imagine this picture. He's just said, how precious your thoughts are. And then he says this, if only you, God, would slay the wicked. Away from me, you who are bloodthirsty. Imagine, what's that picture of slay the wicked? Dead men? Blood splatter? I mean, what is the picture here? It's ugly. He goes on, he said, away from me, you bloodthirsty men who are thirsty for the blood of other people. They speak of you with evil intent, God. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. That was a sweet picture, amazing picture. Brutal. Right here, it's like, it's like terrible. And you're like, what in the world? Now, there are things called imprecatory psalms, and that's a big word that says, I'm cursing you right now. Okay, that's an imprecatory psalm. So if you're really upset with somebody, you're like, I'm going to take it all Bible on you. I'm imprecating you right at this moment. I am calling down curses of God on you right now. And these are throughout the Psalms. What's interesting to this is you have these 4 verses buried in this beautiful psalm. And I've always wondered about that. Now, there's one way to look at this, and I believe it's valid. God wants you to know, since he knows all about you, he knows all about you. Follow me? And you have some ugly thoughts. Even you, as good as looking as you are, you have some ugly thoughts. All of us at one time or another, or at least this fella has at one time or another, if I was a killing man, I'd be killing you. It just crosses the mind. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it happens, When injustice happens to you, or maybe even worse to your kids, or even worse, so I've heard, your grandkids, you're thinking. I remember one time, Julia was coming up. She was like 4 or 5 years old, and we're at this deal, probably 5 because she was in kindergarten, and she was waiting to climb up this monkey bars kind of thing. And this boy was ahead of her, and she was waiting, and there's a long line, and he just wasn't making the next step. I don't know if he's afraid or what it was, but he just sitting there. And she was speaking for the group, and she's like, would you move it along? And she's up here. And he turns around, and he kicked her right in the eye. And I saw it at 40 feet, and I was there in an instant. It was the fastest I've ever moved in my life. But anyways, I was there in a minute. And keep in mind the incredibly ridiculous nature of this, because this boy, he was a tiny boy, and relatively speaking, I was a big man, and I found myself reaching for him, and I was like, don't touch the boy, okay? So I'm like, okay, so I'm now holding the monkey bars, and I'm like, why would you do that? And I'm trying to comfort her because she's crying, and he's like, she got what she deserved. And I was like, I wish I could give you what you deserve, sweet, sweet, sweet child of God. And I escorted him gently and with great lilting effect to his teacher, praying that there be deep condemnation there. But anyway, but that's us. That's us. We live in a world like this. And it strikes me that where this is coming from in David, and I do want to be clear, this is all through the Bible. Amos 5:15 says you love good, you hate evil. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, he said, man, if you don't accept God, you are accursed. Jesus quotes 3 times from Psalm 69, and Psalm 69 says stuff like, this isn't what he quotes, but he's very familiar, obviously, with this psalm where he's like, pour out your wrath on them and destroy them. So these are things that are in the Word, and here's why. And I think we can picture it in this way. It's almost as if David's going along beauty, and he's focused on the nature of God, beauty, and he doesn't get to a picture, he gets to a window all of a sudden. And he looks out and sees the things of evil. And because he's not absorbed in those things of evil, and he's so focused on the things of God, it is like a shock to the system. As it crosses his mind, man, there are some people out there that are just letting the devil run it for them. And it's this visceral response. And what I want us to hear is this. It's not that I want to encourage you. Well, let me think about that just a minute. The church is always doing pendulum. If you study it historically, and I don't mean one congregation, I mean generally speaking. And you'll have eras where it can be really almost ugly and dogmatic only. And then you have eras that it's just almost a cheap grace, okay? And you need to understand that aspects of that are found all through the Bible, but when you're interacting with Jesus, it's balanced. Like one minute he's saying, hey, you go and sin no more, and another minute he's saying, hey, why don't you go sell everything? I'm like, oh, there's a disparity here. Why? Because Jesus knew exactly what was needed, and we struggle with that, and that's fair because we're humans. At the same time, righteous indignation is needed, and I do want to be very clear about that. Righteous indignation is needed. The key, though, is to determine, is it righteous, or is it just you're upset? Or you've lost something that you think you deserve. That's been the real problem with a lot of our human interaction and Christian interaction, is I get upset not because of something about God, it's because you tick me off. You have a different opinion of me, and I'm not going to let that slide. Who are you to tell me what to do? That's not righteous indignation. That's selfishness, okay? We'll cite a lot of times Jesus going and turning the tables and this kind of thing. It happened, okay? 2 things you need to remember. Number 1, why was he doing it? These men were separating people from God. Literally, making it harder and harder for them to get access to God in the way that God had set up their system. But the other thing we do need to remember is how many times does that happen? Even if you take John as chronological, it only happens twice. Okay? 33 years, twice losing it like that? I mean, let you keep that pattern. Let me keep that pattern. That should be a guide for us. But the key here is asking, why is I'm angry? Parenting makes you do this all the time. Now, I'm novice compared to some of you. But I'll tell you, I thought I had it pretty together. I thought I was pretty patient. Then I had children. I'm like, no, I'm an idiot. I'm totally impatient. Why? Because I have a way that life is supposed to go, and my children constantly don't think that that's the right idea. And so you're constantly trying to nurture them, but in nurturing, that's a nice way to say, I'm putting up with the things I hate about you to get you to a better place, okay? And that's the kind of thing that happens because we're humans living together, okay? That's the nature of how that goes. But we have to have that lens to say righteous indignation is needed, but I must make sure, God, is this what you're talking about? God, am I submitted to you? Is this about you and not about my opinion or my comforts? So I want us to understand that both elements are so critical. Now, back to the psalm. As he's going through here, he sees this very, very intense beauty that's coming out. But on the other hand, he sees this raging beast. And the thing that's interesting about it to me is this. God gave him the world he was living in, okay? Now, what I mean by that is by giving free will, he allowed all of that, which means that God is not scared of it. He's not scared of the intensity of David's anger, and he's not scared of the intensity of the bloodthirsty nature of the people that he's seeing through that proverbial window. God has this for the very reasons that David has already established. Because here's the interesting thing. The same way that he intently has looked into the life of David and the life of all of us, he's also looked into these bloodthirsty men's life. He's also looked into these people that are using his name in vain. And he's saying, I think he's saying, by including this, he's saying, David, I accept you as you are. But also, I want you to understand that all of this is part of my work too. I'm working in the lives of those people as well. I'm working on their setting as well. What's interesting to me, that's kind of funny if you put it in succession, he says right before this, or right after this, he says, I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. And then 2 verses later, it says, hey, would you see if there's any offensive way in me? Can you imagine that? Like somebody says, look, I need to tell you something. And they're like, you're an imbecile and I hate your guts. And then it's like, is there anything rude I ever do? And you're like, whoa, hold up. Let's jump back, reset a little bit. And he's saying to David, it's a legitimate request because David is grappling with the very things you grapple with and I grapple with. Because as we look out our windows, there's a lot of beast kind of stuff. And God's saying, I've got it. I've got it taken care of for the very same reasons that you can feel comforted as you consider these other aspects of me. Okay, so I have 5 minutes, is that right? 5 minutes, 6 minutes? Okay. All right. Now here's what I really want to encourage you in. And I had thought about this in another place, but here's the application, the implication that I would really hope that you would take away. When you find yourself in spots that are threatening, when you find yourself in spots that really you're like, I don't know how this is going to go, I can't even envision what it would look like if I did it right. God is saying to us, because of this intimate and intricate knowledge I have of you, you can be at peace. There was a certain situation I found myself in when I was at Texas Tech, and we were in grad classes learning to be counselors. And so there was this group therapy class we were in, and we're going to learn how to do group therapy work. And so I'd sensed literally in the first couple weeks of being in school, even though it's in Texas, still part of the Bible Belt, there are some people with very, very strong opinions about Christianity and specifically about ministers. And it was not hidden, from the get-go. Matter of fact, I remember a teacher, there was a Christian event had come to town, and I don't even know what it was about, but she got a hold of it, and for like 15 minutes, she just ripped it and ripped it and ripped it. And I was like, I don't think any of those things you're saying are true. But man, the majority of the class was like, and I had multiple people say, man, I believed in God until I got to school and learned the truth. So this was the spirit of it. So I was really trying to be wise in how I related because I didn't just want to get my education, I wanted to make an impact, but what was the wise way? And so what I decided was, even though I was a minister, I wanted people to know me first by my love and not by my title. And so these first months that we were in school, I was really trying to make connection and see how I could be a blessing. So it came to this particular time, and we'd been about 4 weeks in this group practice, and I knew that this time I was going to either have to lie or say directly, I work in ministry. Because we were going to say, here's my profession, here's how I feel about my profession, here's how I feel my profession affects me. And so I realized I was walking onto campus, and it was like with each step, it was like, dun, 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 dun. Oh, it's not me. Okay. I get it now. Okay. I was like, what did I do? Okay. Anyway, so it's like the worst is yet to come. And all of a sudden it hit me is this psalm in Psalm 24:1, which says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Same kind of, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I go from your presence? All of a sudden it hit me. And it's so basic. God is on Texas Tech campus. God is here. God is in that classroom already. And I just felt a lightning and momentum. And I remember sitting in that, it came my turn sitting in that circle, and I said, I'm a minister, and here's what I do, and here's how I feel about it. And then everybody has a response time. And it's kind of quiet. And then one lady, I'll never forget this, she goes, I am so glad I knew you before I knew what you did, because I wouldn't be in this group. And I was like, thank you, God, so much that you paced it like that. And I just need you to know, it wasn't because I was in ministry that I got that right. It's because I decided not to give way to fear and trust him. That's yours too. There is no place that is threatening to God, and so there is no place that needs to be threatening to us. Man, I'll never get used to that. Okay, so anyway, I remember a friend say, so do I need to stop now? I do? Yes, okay. All right, one more minute. Okay. I had a friend say when he would go to Mexico, he didn't speak Spanish, and all of a sudden it hit him, God's already here. God already speaks Spanish. And it's just that kind of way. God already speaks the language in whatever place you're going, whatever situation you're going. He's ready. He's ready for whatever life is happening and for wherever he's taking you. So I pray you're blessed. I'll pray over you quickly and then we'll transition. God, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for these people and what amazing faith lives that they have lived. And I just am grateful for each decision that has led them to continue to walk with you. I pray tonight that your word has made the connections that my words never could, and that you would encourage us to see you clearly and see how you see us clearly. Protect us from our fear by reminding us of the truth. It's in your Son we pray. Amen.